I had driven that road 100 times before. It's not the most gentle road for my car to be going over, but it's a faster way to get home than seldom has another driver on it. It's a road I don't know if I'll ever be able to take again. Whenever I start pulling up to the dirt path that takes me through the forest, I can feel my fingers tense up. I look through the trees as if they were the approaching jaws of a predator. About a month ago, I got stuck in those woods. For days and weeks, my experience in the woods only came to me as dreams. I only remembered the night I had gotten stuck in bits and pieces, my consciousness slowly piecing together a puzzle that I think I was trying to forget. When I remembered it all, when the puzzle was complete, I understood why. It was late that night, later than usual. I'm one of those guys that don't like to take work home, so they'll try to do it all before leaving the office. We had a big presentation coming up that was incredibly important for our firm, and I was elected leader on it. This presented the opportunities for a pay raise and possibly a promotion, so I took it very seriously. The project was stressful, but I didn't want to worry my wife with it, so I called her and told her I'd be staying late to tidy some things up. I didn't end up leaving the office that night until about 2 hours after I was meant to clock out. Surprisingly, I wasn't really tired or anything. I was just excited to get home and eat something. My car was the last to leave that parking lot. The roads were pretty empty, the occasional headlight crossing mine. The sky was dark. We live around little light pollution, so I always got to look up at the stars when I drove home. I liked that part. Even on that night, I looked up at the small white lights hanging in the sky. There wasn't a moment of hesitation when I came to the turnoff that brought me onto the dirt road. I could either continue on the highway or cut through the forest to get home. The highway takes about an hour depending on traffic, but the dirt road can just about cut that time in half, even when you factor in that I have to drive slower to not damage the car. I could hear the sound of smooth pavement give way to the crunch of nature underneath my tires as I pulled into the forest. It wasn't long until my car was surrounded on both sides by trees like I had parted a great green sea. My headlights conducted me forward, shining down on the light brown path before me. Rolling down the window, I felt the cool air fill the car. The air always felt nice there, and with the windows down, I could listen to the wildlife. Perhaps that should have been my first warning that night. Normally, I could hear the chirps of crickets and distant howls of, I think, wolves. But that night, the forest had grown silent. It was just my car making noise as rubber tires pushed down on the sparse spreading of stones in the path. After about 10 minutes of the drive, there was a brief spot of light to my left. I nearly didn't catch it as my car continued forward. It was white and sat deep in the woods, almost hidden by the trees between us. I slowed my car down a moment and observed the light. It was in the direction of the highway, but I don't think a headlight would be seeable from where I was. The light was also still, so it couldn't have been a car. I had considered that maybe, for whatever reason, someone had ventured into the woods and I was seeing a flashlight. That doesn't seem like such a good idea, and as I said before, the light was still. The light disappeared just as I was about to foolishly call out to it. I don't know why I thought the attention of a stranger was a good idea when I was completely alone in the woods. I waited for a moment to see if it would reappear, but when it didn't, I shrugged it off and went on my way again. There wasn't even a noise associated with the light. No voice or crunching of foliage, so I just drove away from it. Another 10 minutes of the uninterrupted drive passed by, and then another. And then another. I thought I must have been driving pretty slow. It wasn't unusual that I could take 40 or so minutes to reach the end of the road. Perhaps I was driving slow because I was still thinking about the light I had seen and was trying to find it again. Then another 20 minutes went by. My eyes kept darting back to the green numbers on my dashboard's clock. Was it a few minutes ahead? At the rate things were going, I would have been home by that point, even if I had taken the highway. I was starting to feel understandably tense. There was a conscious effort to keep a decent pace, so I should have exited the road, or at least have seen some of the familiar markers near the end of it. Trying to distract myself, I reached for the radio and clicked to turn it on, hoping that something could distract me. When my fingers pressed the chilled radio buttons, I heard noise fill my car. A plume of static bounced around the interior. Clicking through various channels, I was met with nothing but an unsettling, whiny static. It was a higher-pitched noise than your typical radio fuzz, and it only served to put me further on edge, so I turned it back off. Jesus, I whispered to myself, looking at the clock when I turned the radio off. Another 15 minutes had gone by. Time felt like it was moving so fast, like the minutes were just getting away from me. I started watching the trees, waiting for something familiar to appear. Anything that signaled I was close to the end of the road. I knew something was up, though. There was no way I should have still been on that road. Even if I was driving half the speed, the end should have been in sight. Did I take the wrong road? Were there even other roads to take into the forest? If there was, I had never seen them. No, it was the right road. It wasn't until another 20 minutes of stubborn driving had gone by that I finally stopped my car again. Pulling over slightly, I sat back and gave myself a chance to take in some of the cool air to try and cool down. I thought of my wife and realized that it had probably been a while since she had heard from me, so I decided to call her, try to explain what was going on. Maybe she could even rationalize it for me. It should come as no surprise that when I attempted to dial my wife before I even pressed the last button, I heard the same pinging static that came from my radio. I nearly dropped the phone as the noise assaulted my ear. Quickly hanging up the phone, sat back in my seat. A moment of frustration took a hold of me, and I threw my hand forward, smacking the steering wheel, pressing on the horn. A booming noise emitted from my car and filled the forest around me. Needing to calm myself down, I unstrapped my seatbelt and exited the car, thinking that being able to walk around for a minute would help clear my head. The forest looked alien. I had driven it so many times before, and it was always such a peaceful place. But that night, I felt unwelcomed. The trees looked like they were bending in towards the road like fingers trying to grasp at me. That's when I looked up to the sky and at the stars I found so much comfort in. I could feel my heart sinking as I looked up at the sky. I didn't understand how what I was seeing was possible. With panic setting quickly in, I found myself back in my car and pushing much harder down on the acceleration than I should have been. The calm I was trying to find and hold on to was leaving my body like someone had poked holes in me. Faster and faster, my car plowed down the forest path. It was just a straight line, but I knew that the forest path had some twists and turns, but they weren't there. The trees felt like they weren't changing. Even the dirt path faded away into brown static, never changing. I could feel myself twitching in my seat, my fingers shaking against the hard steering wheel. Vulgarities slipped out of my lips. Or at least I think they did, but it could have just been that the voice in my head was so loud, I thought I was saying them. All while I was driving frantically, I continued looking at the sky, hoping the scenery would change. My awe and anxiety all culminated when my lips parted. "Where are the fucking stars?" My words seemed to echo in the small confines of my car as I watched the tips of trees rushing past my vision frame the empty dark sky. There wasn't a single speck of white in the sky. It was just endless darkness. I almost felt woozy from just watching it. Nothing was making sense. How was I still on that road? Where did the stars go? I felt my worries filling up and my composure starting to fade away. I needed to pull over again. If I had kept going the way I was, I would have slid off the road or destroyed the underside of my car. What was supposed to take around 30 minutes had contained me for over 3 hours. I stopped watching the time go by after 3 hours on that road. I couldn't stand to look anymore. Standing outside the stationary car, I brought my hand up and rubbed between my eyes, trying my hardest to think of any rational answer. What was my next course of action? Do I turn around and drive the 3 hours or so back? Do I press on and hope that I'm close to the end? I thought that turning around was the best answer. It would mean another 4 hours or so to get home, but I didn't know what was ahead of me. I thought it was a good idea, until the 3 hours of driving back turned into 4, and then into 5. Without an answer, for the third and final time, I pulled my car to the side and got out, this time dropping to the ground. I was so frustrated and confused. I didn't understand how I wasn't tired or hungry, how the sun hadn't come up. There was no sense behind driving through the woods for 3 hours, turning around and driving back 5 hours, and not reaching where you entered the woods originally. The gas indicator on my dash hadn't moved an inch either. I stood and looked up at the cold and empty sky, ready to scream at the top of my lungs, when I saw a light. It was off in the distance, but it was something new, something different. The light was reaching into the sky, like a spotlight. It was a pillar of white that penetrated the forest. Then I watched another light form. That's when I realized the lights weren't coming from the ground. I watched a pillar of white light descending into the forest. Then another, and another. It looked like great concrete pillars holding up an ancient coliseum. One after another, I watched as above me more and more lights started appearing. Tilting my head more and rotating my body, I saw that these lights were polluting the forest all around me. So captivating was that sight that I almost didn't even notice that high-pitched mechanical whine that was filling the silence. It sounded just like the static I had heard earlier. More and more lights came down and I was able to see where they were coming from. I at first thought they were reaching down from space, but no. The stars were still there. The night sky hadn't gone blank. The stars were just being obstructed by a massive dark ship that enveloped the forest around me. My awe for the lights quickly dissipated and I started reaching for my car's door. That's when one of the lights landed on me. I was engulfed by a pillar of light. The light caused my view to reduce to blacks and whites. It was like I was stuck in an unfinished comic. At first, I felt weightless, like I was on the moon or something, but then I could feel my body starting to heat up. I started sweating profusely and struggled to catch a breath that wasn't filled with so much heat that it stung my lungs. I tried walking out of the circle, but just like the forest, the pillar of light seemed unending. The heat continued to rise until I thought my skin would melt off of my body, and then a figure appeared before me. I looked at it for a moment. My world was a hazy static of black and white, so I couldn't make anything out about the figure other than it was much taller than me. It almost looked like a tree itself. Before I could try to strain my eyes or run, it reached out a limb. I think it was a limb anyway, and then my memory went dark. I couldn't tell you what happens next. My memory from after that hasn't returned. I'm not sure if I even want it to. When I woke back up, I found myself laying in bed next to my wife. When I had woken up, I didn't remember anything about the night before. Like I said earlier, the memories of the forest came back over time. When she got up, I asked her how I got home last night. I told her I remembered entering the forest to drive home, but after that my memory cuts out. She placed her hand gently on my forehead to check my temperature. While her cool hand pressed against my skin, she explained that she wasn't really sure when I got home. She was tired, so she went to bed early. Sometime later, she felt me flop into bed beside her like I had jumped from the ceiling. Scared the shit out of her, but when she turned to yell at me, she couldn't move. So she thought maybe she was just experiencing sleep paralysis or something. Especially, she said,
"After the figure left our room, I was able to move again."
Over the days, my memory of the night events started coming back to me. I never got around to telling my wife, but I think she's starting to suspect something. She noticed a scar under my hair on the back of my neck. She asked how it got there, and I didn't have a good answer. It hurts, though. The scar pulsates, and even now, I can feel it. It isn't the only one, either. I have similar throbbing scars on my abdomen and just below my left ankle. They burn, just like the light did. Whenever I focus on the pain, I feel like I'm back in the forest, desperately looking for answers. I want to know what happened to me, what is happening to me, but I don't want those memories back. Going about my daily life with this pain always just under the surface, these memories of my night plaguing my mind. Every time I'm coming home from work and I see that dirt road leading into the forest, it all comes back to me. I can see it as vivid as day, and the details never change. Needless to say, I take the highway now.